A pretty big name says he's looking for a change of scenery, and on this edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast, Hunter and I discuss if he should be on the Penguins' radar.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, hockey fans, and welcome back to another edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Patrik Laine. You can follow me on Twitter at synonym for wet. Joined as always by the one and only Hunter Hodes. You can follow him on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can give our show's account a follow at LO_Penguins. And we thank you for making this your first listener watch of the day, because we're your team every day. And don't forget, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. And before we get started today, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So it is June. We are still waiting for the conclusion of the Stanley Cup Final, free agency, the NHL draft, and all that good stuff. But we did get some news, not totally Penguins specific, but it is worth talking about because it's a subject, Hunter, that you and I have brought up before about a player who now officially, for the most part, sounds like he is looking to get a change of scenery, and that is Patrik Laine. According to the Athletic's Pierre LeBrun, he is working with the Columbus Blue Jackets to get a change in scenery. However, he is still in the NHLPA player assistance program. So obviously we hope everything with him is getting worked out. We hope that he's healthy and can get back on track, because when he's at his best, he is one of the better players in the National Hockey League. But back to the topic at hand, it does appear that Columbus is on board with this not long after they have hired Don Waddell as their new general manager. So you look at a guy like Patrik Laine. He was the second overall pick in 2016. He has shown several flashes of being one of the better goal scorers in the NHL, even in his time a little bit with the Columbus Blue Jackets, but before that with the Winnipeg Jets. So Hunter, the question on this one is very, very simple. Should he be on the Penguins' radar, and can they make that happen?
I think he definitely should be on the Penguins' radar. I would definitely be looking to at least take a flyer on Patrik Laine for this season. The thing is, you look at his cap hit, $8.7 million. The Penguins would have to ask the Blue Jackets to retain at least probably a little bit on that contract. And if you are the Blue Jackets, you probably don't want to, right? Just because if you're looking to trade this player, you want to get rid of that entire $8.7 million cap hit, so you have quite a bit more cap space to work on other things relating to the team. I don't think they want to retain, just throwing an example out there, 30, 35, 40%, heck, even half that contract. That just doesn't really do anything for them. I think for a trade to work with the Penguins, at least one of Riley Smith or Rickard Rakell would have to go the other way. I would personally do that if I were Kyle Dubas, but I'm not sure if Don Waddell and the Columbus Blue Jackets would want to do that. He's only 26 years old right now. He has shown a history of being able to score quite a bit at the NHL level. Heck, in just his second season in the league with the Winnipeg Jets, he's put up 44 goals, 70 points in 82 games. The season after that, he put up 30 goals and 50 points with the Jets. And even with the Columbus Blue Jackets before this year, I know he only played in 18 games, but with in 2021, 2022, he had 26 goals, 56 points in 56 games, so point a game. And then last season, basically was at a point per game level as well. 22 goals, 52 points in 55 games. Those are just the counting stats, but he is a very good goal scorer when he is healthy. But that's also another big thing, Pat. He needs to show that he can stay healthy throughout the course of a season. That's also been, I think, a small problem of his throughout his career as well. But he brings that finishing element that the Penguins really have lacked the last couple of years. I know I put a tweet out there yesterday on my Twitter and I got some pretty mixed reactions to it. I mean, that's basically par for the course, I think, at this point with Twitter. Some people like a certain player, some people don't. People have their opinions, and that's totally fine. I saw some people saying like, oh, you don't win with that type of player. He's not good defensively. And I'll say this, I'm not getting Patrik Laine for his defense. There's plenty of other players, I think, on this team that can play better defensively in their own zone that are forwards. I'm getting Patrik Laine so he could score. So if I were Kyle Dubas in the front office, I would very much have him on their radar, and I would look to take a flyer on him. But I think it's more the Columbus Blue Jackets. Would they want to trade him to the Penguins? And would they be willing to eat some of that cap? And I just don't know if they would want to do either of those two things.
That's all very fair. And to kind of build on something you were saying about the people who say, oh, defensive liability and all this stuff, it reminds me a lot of Phil Kessel. Not getting Phil Kessel to play a two-way game. I'm getting Phil Kessel to go put 20, 30, 40 goals in the net. I'm not worried about what he does in the defensive zone. But then I look at the Columbus Blue Jackets and Don Waddell. Waddell started a lot of his career as a scout for the Penguins. He was with the Atlanta Thrashers before they became the Winnipeg Jets. He didn't go to Winnipeg, I don't believe. With Atlanta, he moved on to the Carolina Hurricanes. And there is aside from being a scout for the Penguins, a lot of history between Atlanta, Carolina, and the Penguins in making these moves. So Don Waddell isn't dyed in the wool a rival with the Penguins like the Blue Jackets are. This is a different general manager in the front office. It's going to be a different front office. And then on their overall outlook on this, I actually don't think that they would mind retaining salary on Patrik Laine, because you look at their cap situation right now, a handful of RFAs that they've got to re-sign this summer. Few of them are pretty good that they are probably going to have to give a raise to, but there's really nobody in the next 2 years that's coming up either as an RFA or a UFA on Columbus's cap that if you say retain 35% of a Patrik Laine contract for the next 2 years is really going to hurt you all that badly. And then you also add in the fact that we said this when the Columbus Blue Jackets made their changes in the front office. There's a lot of very young talent in this system. They have drafted very well over the past few years. You're not going to have to pay those guys right out of the gate. They're going to be making league minimum or just a little over league minimum on their rookie deals. So again, they find themselves in a very advantageous situation right now where they have nearly $24 million in cap space and a lot of draft picks in their pocket, as well as if you can get Ricard Raquel or Riley Smith or somebody like that who, yeah, they're not going to come in and put you on the fast track to contention, but they'll give you some veteran presence for this young team that you have. They can ride shotgun with Johnny Gaudreau and help him out. They can help Boone Jenner a little bit. And I look at it as this is a player who isn't going out in a negative way. He's not coming out and saying, hey, I don't like the Blue Jackets. I don't like Columbus. I want out. This isn't a divorce. This is just a separation. This guy has gone through a lot over the past couple of years. He's looking for a fresh start. He came to your team and was a very loyal soldier for the most part. So you want to do right by him. And if you're the Penguins and you can get, like I said, them to retain 30, 35% for the next 2 years, I think this could be a possibility for Dubas and the Penguins.
Well, yeah, if they retain 30 to 35%, I mean, I would definitely be all over that. I'm just a little more skeptical than you because, I mean, you're right. They do have close to 24 million in cap space this upcoming summer, but they're going to try to grow that as much as they can by getting Laine out, getting him a fresh start with a new team, because more than likely they'll have over 30 million of cap space once he's dealt to another team. And then they can do quite a bit with that. I know they have quite a bit of young talent that's going to be in the lineup next year, but I could still see them making some sort of maybe big splash in free agency or maybe via the trade market after this trade is done. So I guess I'm just a little more skeptical that they would retain 30 to 35. But if you can still get them to retain, I don't know, 1 million of that, 1.5 million, I think that's also a win for the Penguins, just getting it down as much as you can, just because right now 8.7 million for 2 years is too high of a ticket, at least for me. And, you know, I do picture, at least fit-wise for the Penguins, him playing in the top 6. I think on Evgeny Malkin's wing, potentially with Bunting. You could also put him up there with Crosby if you want, alongside, you know, Rust or whoever else is up there with Sid. But, you know, it makes the team a lot deeper overall, and it just adds another pure goal scorer, which I do think this team really needs for this upcoming season.
They really do need another better pure finisher in their top six. I wouldn't say it's high on their priority list, but if you can get one in Patrik Laine, I think you bounce at that opportunity no matter what. I also think this about Waddell and the Blue Jackets is we know his track record. This is a guy who thinks both short and long term, and he's not going into Columbus and thinking, okay, we're just a couple pieces away from being a contender. He knows this is going to take a couple of years. So if you have to take the heat early on in getting rid of Laine, retaining a little bit, and making a trade that might be underwhelming, that's not going to impact the long-term plan for the Columbus Blue Jackets, because the next 2 seasons are not a contention window for Columbus. They might become competitive. They might become a player that sniffs around the fringes of the playoffs, but they're not a team that's going to be in the conversation as a contender in the East. So sending him to Pittsburgh for 2 years, it's not like there's going to suddenly be a second round matchup between the Blue Jackets and Penguins where Laine fills the net and knocks them out and they go, damn, why'd we send him there? So I do think that there is an actual possibility to go out and get Laine. The devil now is in the details if they can make it work.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be cool to see him score some regular season goals against the Blue Jackets, but yeah, I don't see the Blue Jackets being in the playoff hunt these next couple of years. He very much knows that he's walking into a rebuild. I think with Jarmo Kekalainen, he made so many moves for the Blue Jackets last summer just because he was trying to save his job, and I think he was like, okay, I'm going to make all these signings and all this other stuff and try to get this team at least closer to playoff contention, even though when you looked up and down that roster, even after the signings, they still weren't that close, and you saw how the season went. But I think you're going to see a more patient approach from Waddell. I also think the asking price for Laine is not going to be that big. I don't think you're going to have to pay a king's ransom for him like you would some other players that are on the market. So I do think that also would benefit the Penguins as well, even though they are considered the Blue Jackets' top rival.
Yeah, for sure. But that is going to do it for our first segment. When we come back, even though this is not a mailbag episode, we got such a good question in relation to our mailbag that we figured it needed its own segment in an episode like today. We're going to figure out which Penguins Cup team is the ultimate champion. But before we do that, we got to tell you about our first sponsor, and that is Game Time. It's the Stanley Cup Final and the NBA Finals, and we know this is one of the best times in the sports calendar every single year, and Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off, and with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. You can pick out specific games or matchups you'd like to attend, and you can find good deals with features such as customize your spot, last-minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals, and you'll be able to find easy tickets. You'll get views from your seats in the app, and best of all, the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, and more. With last-minute deals, you can save up to 60% off of buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Zone deals save you even more when you choose a section, and then you can let Game Time choose your seats. Toggling all-in prices, that shows you the total up front, so you get none of those surprise fees at checkout, and Seat Views give you a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. And the lowest price guarantee gives you the guarantee that you're going to get the lowest price, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, we're back here on the Thursday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm Patrik Damp, joined as always by the illustrious Hunter Hodes. And Hunter, I'm going to need you to take this one real quick because I do need forgiven here. Who was it that gave us this great question?
So it is Brandon on Penguins Twitter. His if I can find it real quick here. I have it in my notes. It's you, me, and Dupuis. Brandon Sofranco asked us the question. If you were to basically do a round robin type tournament between the 5 Stanley Cup teams in Pittsburgh Penguins franchise history, which one would come out on top? And when I showed that to you, your eyes definitely lit up as much as mine did.
Yeah, this is always a fun off-season thing to do, to kind of, the way I always like to put it, fire up NHL 24, recreate these teams, put them in a tournament, make them play each other and see what happens. So for those who may be unaware, if you are, no big deal. We all have our own entry into fandom. That is 1991, 1992, 2009, 2016, and 2017 are the 5 Stanley Cup winning teams. So I made an executive decision on this and how we're going to work this. Here are your first matchups for this entire round robin. No disrespect to the team we gave a lot of love to yesterday, the 2009 team. They're not making it out of the round robin. Great team, a lot of fun, but you compare the rosters, it's probably the weakest of the 5. So that gives us a matchup.
I will say prime Crosby, prime Malkin, prime Jordan Stahl. That team was very good. Marc-Andre Fleury was playing very well. The Cook, Stahl, Kennedy line was great too. But when I compare that team compared to the other 4 teams, I just see a few more weaknesses overall in that one compared to the other 4. Again, no disrespect to that team. They slayed the Dragon in the Detroit Red Wings, but I think when this team stacks up to the other 4 Stanley Cup teams, I think they're probably the weakest.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. So that gives us a semifinal matchup, and this is how I seeded it because, again, executive decision. I want to get to this finals discussion about these 2 teams as the ones I would have going head-to-head. Your first semifinal matchup is the 1991 Stanley Cup champions against the 2016 Stanley Cup champions, and then the 1992 champions against the 2017 champions. I imagine you're going to agree with this, Hunter, because we have talked about this both in text and before we hit record. The winners of the semifinals, 2016 champions and the 1992 champions, for an unbelievable final. And these are 2 teams that you look up and down the lineup, ton of talent, went on incredible runs as a champion. And if I had to pick a team, it depends on the day, really. I think one day I'm going to say 2016. The other day I'm going to say 1992. I'm taking the 92 Penguins.
I feel like it's such a coin flip because both those teams are such juggernauts looking back. I mean, the 92 team won 11 games in a row to win the Stanley Cup. They did not lose a game after going down 2-1 against the Rangers in that second round series. That was also the series where Adam Graves hurt Mario Lemieux, and then you saw the Barry Graves sign. Obviously, that's just hilarious. But after that game 3, the Penguins did not lose a single game the rest of that run. That's how good that team was. And when Mario was in the lineup, he was an absolute freak. 16 goals, 34 points in 15 games. Kevin Stevens, he had 13 goals, 28 points in 21 games. I think people forget, or if you weren't alive, I know I wasn't alive either during that time, but for especially the folks that weren't alive, Artie Stevens was on another level during that playoff run, man. He was insane. Jaromir Jagr was also great. Larry Murphy was great too, but Artie was just unbelievable.
And the thing that's crazy to me is he was absolutely on another level in 92. He was better in 1991.
Which is nuts.
And in 1991, he did the thing that I always hold up against Rangers fans. They all love the Mark Messier, we're going to win tonight, game 7 guaranteed. And it gets talked about in hockey lore endlessly. But 3 years prior, with their backs against the wall against the Boston Bruins, Kevin Stevens comes out and goes, I'm guaranteeing you right now, we're going to win 4 straight. And what do the Penguins do? They win 4 straight to go to their first ever Stanley Cup Final. And Stevens had something like 11 points in 4 games and just decimated the Bruins to back up his guarantee. And nobody talks about it.
He was awesome, man. It's crazy that for as good as he was in 92, he was still a little bit better in 91. What a special player he was in his prime. But then I look at that 2016 team, Pat. Sidney Crosby, still very much in the prime of his career. Evgeny Malkin, also on another level. Chris Letang, playing the best hockey of his life. That 2016 run from Chris Letang was special, and you easily could have made an argument for him to win the Conn Smythe. He was special against the Sharks in that Stanley Cup Final, and as I said, he was great throughout, too. And just obviously the HBK line, Hagelin, Benito, Kessel. Defensively, this team smothered the opposition. They were also quite the buzzsaw. And then Matt Murray, the answer in net for 2016. I really do think this is a coin flip. I think if they were to play a best of 7 series, I think it goes 7. I'm going to give the slightest edge to 2016, but I can easily see 92 taking it just because, seeing both cores go up against each other with how they were playing, man, that would make for some electric hockey overall. It's so close.
Here's the one reason right now that I would give the edge to 92.
Mm-hmm.
In an era where goaltenders rarely broke the 900 save percentage, Tom Barrasso had a 907. And if you were to somehow era adjust this fictional series that we're talking about and turn it into modern day hockey, you can't tell me Barrasso wouldn't have like a 950 save percentage. If you were to put his talent into a modern goalie, give him modern equipment and modern defense, that guy would be unbeatable. And then people are like, oh, well, you have the trapezoid now, which he didn't have back then. He could go anywhere and play the puck, which was his staple. He was one of the best puck handling goalies ever, but you don't think he would adjust to that very easily and still be able to just be a one-man breakout from behind the net? Like, you look at the way he played in those 2 back-to-back runs. And again, no disrespect to Matt Murray. He was sensational in 2016.
That's a fun goalie matchup, man. Both Murray with how he played in both runs versus Barrasso with how good he was. I mean, there's a reason why Barrasso is arguably the greatest goaltender in the franchise's history. It's either him or Marc-Andre Fleury.
Yeah, they are 1 and 2, and there's not much debate anywhere else. But the thing is, they both, and actually all 5 of the Penguins championships have the main through line, is that they are just stacked with some of the best players ever do it. I mean, 92, Lemieux, Stevens, Francis, Yager, Tocchet, Murphy, Trottier, Mullen, Tom Barrasso. Then the 2016, Crosby, Malkin, Letang, Kessel, just Marc-Andre Fleury, Matt Murray, like so many of the best players. And this folds into something I said yesterday when we were talking about the 2009 team. The embarrassment of riches that we have had in Pittsburgh to play hockey for the NHL team is just absolutely absurd.
100%. And another really underrated matchup that I think we're both missing right now, but we probably shouldn't be, Larry Murphy versus Chris Letang. 2 of the 3 best defensemen in franchise history. Paul Coffey is obviously the other one. I would say those are the 3 best defensemen this franchise has ever had. People can rearrange the order. I think in terms of impact, I'm putting Chris Letang number 1 above everyone else. Talent, I'm going to go Coffey over everyone else. But Larry Murphy, man, he could do it all. Offensively, defensively. But Letang has also done that as well throughout his career, and seeing those 2 go head to head in the prime of their careers would also be such a treat.
And the thing is, the 2 of them, and this will be the last point before we move on, they both have the clutch gene. You look at their playoff runs, especially in championship years, in the biggest moments, they rise to the occasion and do something that sticks in the mind forever. Like, you think of that 92 team, the incredible comeback in game 1 against the Blackhawks.
Yep.
Larry Murphy's at the center of everything that happens in that comeback. The 2016 Stanley Cup, the Stanley Cup winning goal, Chris Letang. You go through some other Chris Letang highlights. 2009, scores the goal against the Capitals to keep their season alive. Well, not alive because they weren't going to get eliminated, but they were pretty much going to be down 3-0, and that was going to, for all intents and purposes, end their season. So those two guys, just when it matters most, they show up.
Yeah, 100%. They were, or they have been, two of the most clutch players in franchise history. But this is a really fun topic, man. I think we're really splitting hairs when it comes to these teams, but I think I'm just giving a slight edge to 2016, which is how much of a buzzsaw they were, how I feel like they could grind the 92 team down just enough and play just maybe a bit better defensively to come out on top. Again, if it's a 7-game series, I think it goes the full 7 games, and I think the 2016 team wins by 1 goal in that game 7. But I could also easily see the 92 team winning. I'm just giving the slight edge to the 2016 team just because I think personally that's the best Stanley Cup winning team in the franchise's history.
We will have to keep this topic in our back pocket for this summer and get some good guests to come on and state their case on who the best championship team in Penguins history is. But that's going to do it for this second segment. When we come back, we're going to take a quick look at tonight's game 3 of the Stanley Cup Final between the Florida Panthers and the Edmonton Oilers. And we will do that right after this when we tell you about our next sponsor, and that is Ultimate Hockey GM. Hey, Locked On Penguins fans, I want to take a moment to bring up one of our partners, the mobile game Ultimate Hockey GM. Have you ever dreamed of becoming an NHL GM and managing your franchise? Do you think you could run the Penguins better than Kyle Dubas? Well, your dream can come true, and this game is most definitely for you. Manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through the seasons, and lead it to glory. Hire the right coaches and staff, trade players or draft picks, navigate through free agency and the draft, all in a challenging and realistic game world. As a Penguins fan, you know there is no offseason. GMs constantly are making moves at every point of the year to improve their team's chances, and that's why I think you are going to love this game. I've recently started playing it because I am an absolute nerd. I love making the trades. I love signing the free agents and leading my team to glory. Ultimate Hockey GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want and when you want to. By the way, Locked On listeners, you get a 100% free boost to your franchise when using the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in the game store, so make sure to check it out. To download the game, just visit hockeygm.app or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate Hockey GM, start your dynasty today. All right, we're back here for the final segment of the Thursday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Patrik Damp, joined as always by Hunter Hodes. Huge game tonight up in Edmonton as the Oilers look to prevent themselves from falling down 3-0 to the Florida Panthers. On the flip side, the Panthers look to take an absolute stranglehold on the Stanley Cup Final. The Panthers, though, with the chance to push Edmonton to the brink, got a lot of good news today as all the players they were worried that may not be available will be ready to play, including Alexander Barkov. So this is a huge moment because it was a tale of 2 games through 2. In the first game, Edmonton played a very solid game, but then Sergei Bobrovsky happened. Game 2, the Florida Panthers woke up and smothered the Edmonton Oilers. So, Hunter, what is riding on this game for you tonight?
I mean, it's time for Edmonton's top players to answer the call yet again. They've been great throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs. Evan Bouchard, Connor McDavid, and Leon Draisaitl are the main reason why the Oilers are here. Without them going God mode in these playoffs, they would have lost a lot earlier. They've been a bit quiet these first couple of games, especially Draisaitl. He did not have a good game too, but it's time for them to rise up to the moment and get them back into this series. And Knobloch's going to have last change in Edmonton. And also Edmonton's going to be rocking, man. This is their first Stanley Cup Final game in Edmonton in almost 20 years. You know that home ice advantage is going to be key for them. I'm curious to see how that is, but also for the Oilers, I want to see if they can get their forecheck and their cycle going. The Panthers have done a really good job defensively in their own zone, smothering them, really only limiting them to a couple of chances off the rush. The Oilers haven't been able to cycle a lot and get their forecheck going. I'm curious to see if Knoblauch makes some adjustments there. I like some of the lineup decisions he's made. For example, obviously getting CC away from Nurse and also scratching him overall. That makes a lot of sense just because of how bad CC has been in the playoffs. But he's also got to keep Draisaitl and McDavid on separate lines. When you load them up, sure, it's great in a vacuum, but you're also making it easier for Paul Maurice and the Panthers because they can just send out Barkov to match up against that line, and then the other three Panthers lines will go up against the other three Oilers lines, and I will take those other three Panthers lines any day of the week just because they're a deeper team compared to the Oilers. So they got to get that going. Edmonton, that is. They haven't scored a single 5-on-5 goal in this series. That's not good. Obviously, they also haven't scored a single power play goal in this series. With how good the power play was during the regular season and in the playoffs leading into this series, it has to be better starting tonight. They've actually gotten the goaltending so far. Stuart Skinner, I really haven't had a problem with the way he's played. Their offense has just dried up. So I think that's my biggest key for the Oilers to get back into the series is getting their 5-on-5 game going a little bit more, and just having their stars outplay Florida Stars.
They really do, because between Draisaitl, McDavid, Hyman, and RNH, there is one assist between all of them, and it's Connor McDavid. Those guys really have to step up. For Florida, on the other hand, they really just have to keep doing what they're doing. And one of the things they need to continue to take advantage of, which they did near the end of game 2, they have Edmonton frustrated. You could see the way Edmonton was playing by the end of game 2. They knew they were about to fall into an 0-2 hole, and they did not react well. So if Florida wants to just keep playing the game they're playing, being the more physical team, the more agitating team, they'll find themselves in a good position. And to keep it with a cliche here, the biggest thing for Florida tonight, survive the first 5 minutes. You don't have to go out and dominate the first 5. Edmonton's going to come out on fire. The building's going to be rocking. Everybody's going to be going on adrenaline for the first 5 to 7 minutes with an intense crowd behind them. So survive that, play to even, and then it's time to dig in. It's time to play. The adrenaline wears off, and it's time to play. So if they can survive that first 5 to 7 minutes without giving up a goal, giving the momentum to Edmonton, they're going to be in a very good spot, especially if Sergei Bobrovsky continues to play the way he has against the Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah, I was going to bring up Bob if you didn't, just because he's been great in these 2 games. He's been great all playoffs long. If the Oilers want to get back into this, they got to get more traffic around him. I know that sounds so cliche to say, but they've been giving him a lot of very easy shooting lanes so that he can see the puck. And the Oilers, they got to get some traffic, whether that's someone like Adam Henrique or whether that's, Leon in front of the net. Hyman, obviously, he goes to the dirty areas. They got to do something to take away his eyes, just because Bobrovsky was, swallowing up every single puck that he saw in game 2. The Oilers made it very easy for him in that game. Game 1, I feel like Bobrovsky obviously had to steal just because he was on top of his game, but they need to, again, get more bodies in front and just make it a living hell for him in that, just because it feels like he really, outside of that game 1, he really hasn't been fully tested in a game just because of how great the Panthers are defensively. It's time for the Oilers to step it up a little bit.
They really have to. So big one tonight, first Stanley Cup final game in Edmonton since 2006. That gets going at 8 o'clock for us Americans on ESPN and ABC. So that'll do it for this edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Hunter and I will be back tomorrow with another episode, giving you updates on whatever happens with the Penguins and a little bit of a reaction to Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Final. But until then, for Hunter Hodes, I am Patrik Damp. Thank you as always for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Friday.